Hey everyone, and welcome to today's Flow session with the Value Stream Management Consortium. I'm Helen Beal, the CEO here at the VSMC, and today I'm super excited to be joined by Chris Combe, who is one of our ambassadors at the VSMC and many, many other things. Chris, would you like to tell the audience more about yourself, please?
Thanks, Helen. Hi, everyone. Nice to meet you or see you in chat at least. I've been working in tech for close to 20 years now. I've done a bunch of things in financial services and now working for a tech product company called Teamform, where I'm sort of really getting my hands dirty with products and customers and all that sort of fun stuff. Definitely resonate with a lot of the topics for value stream management, team topologies, ways of working, architecture, and all these topics. So hopefully we'll have a fun chat today.
Perfect. I'm sure we will. And today we're going to be talking about ways of working and how value stream management combines with other frameworks in these large enterprises, like the large banking companies that you've worked in, and increases the likelihood of delivering the desired business outcomes that people are after. So probably a good place to start is talking about what other ways of working we might be referring to, and maybe a little bit about their history, how current they are, how relevant they are, and if there is areas that they cross over in VSM. So in your experience, these large enterprises, what other initiatives or transformations and things are they likely to be undergoing?
Yeah, that's a great question. So, I mean, I think many people who've worked in large companies will be familiar with many transformations, and they could be around technology, around practices, culture, and the like. So everything, this will possibly sound like some buzzwords, so forgive me in advance, but, everything from, moving to the cloud, adopting cloud native technologies, changing the way people architect their products and services, things like, microservices from monoliths, all the way to the sort of the DevOpsification, if that's a word, of how we build and deploy and release software into the wild to customers. There's a number of other things around the way we ideate, product management, the UX design thinking, all these sorts of things sort of come together. There's a plethora of sort of agile ways of working, flavors. I won't list them all because we'd be here for hours, but I think everyone's familiar with the flavors of ice cream that people certainly talk about with agile. I would be remiss to forget my good old friend ITIL, which is where I started in the help desk many moons ago. So I have a strong association to incident management, problem management, and these sorts of things as well.
There are just so many moving parts, aren't there? And I think they're just so complicated, these organizations. And I think maybe it's worth talking a little bit as well about kind of how these organizations evolve, how they grow, where they seed from, and how they've become digital delivery machines, and why this has happened and what it means. So something like a big Swiss bank, when and where did they start, and how did they get involved with computing, and where did digital start happening, and those kind of things?
Yeah, I mean, that's quite the story. I mean, certainly anyone who's worked in financial services will probably appreciate from an accounting perspective that banks have had to record transactions, money coming in, money going out, and those sorts of things for hundreds of years. And I think at least financial services was a very early adopter to technology, just simply in the kind of books and record space, recording how transactions occur, and do we have the money that we think we have, right? Are we recording all of that? And I think through those very important topics of keeping a clear, accurate record of financials, and certainly on a financial services scale, you want to make sure that you've got that right for your customers, but also for your own sort of capital and liquidity. So I think over time, many industries have gone through similar changes. There's a need for increasing complexity, often caused by regulations. Regulations are not a bad thing in and of themselves. They're often there to try and prevent bad things from happening. So I'm a fan of regulation, but often they have a cause or a knock-on effect of the way people are building, changing, and managing the complexity around what they build. So I think from that point of view, it's increasingly built up capabilities to be able to adapt to changing environment. I think people are familiar with the term of VUCA. Complexity, the world is really moving more quickly day by day. COVID was a classic example, but there's been countless others in the past, the financial crisis in 2008, etc. So all of these controls, requirements, regulations have necessitated that banks have had to keep up with the appropriate controls and governance to operate. And if you include things like investment banks that have trading and all these sorts of things, technology has been a huge differentiator for them. Quite often there's a brilliant book, I think, called Flash Boys, which will give you a very interesting look at how that works. But effectively, it's a bunch of physics geeks trying to beat the speed of light, network speeds between different cities in America to arbitrage, basically seeing pricing information before another location. So technology has really contributed to those sorts of opportunities in investment banking. So yeah, I mean, there's lots of different ways. And obviously, if you think about things like retail banking, so if I'm a customer with a bank, I have a mobile app. I used to be able to go into a branch. Maybe I wanted to go into a branch or not, but actually now I can do everything on my phone. So yeah, lots of different angles there. And the consumer technology has certainly been pushing big companies to provide that experience as well.
Yeah, so the regulation stuff is really important. So let's try and get to the value stream management element of this. So what is it that makes value stream management different from these other ways of working in these very complex environments that have evolved over this time?
Yeah, so the way I like to think about this is kind of having a flow of information, the way organizations process information, think about a flow of value for a customer or a stakeholder. Information comes into an organization, it's processed somehow, and somewhere at the end there's someone who benefits and gets some value from that. So I think for me, value stream management as a practice, and therefore value stream mapping and all these sorts of activities, is really a kind of no-nonsense way of visually representing and looking at how things interact with each other across the organization. And very selfishly, because of where I work now at Teamform, I'm very interested in the way teams have to interact across organizations. And I think value stream management and the like are a really nice agnostic way of thinking about how work and value flows through organizations, as opposed to perhaps maybe a traditional silo-based organizational structure and hierarchy that people have probably grown up with in large organizations. So it's kind of a no BS way of actually showing how things move. And I think the biggest aha moment typically when you start to do value stream mapping is you actually bring people into the conversation and create a shared understanding. And by doing that, you actually create a really powerful sort of buy-in from people involved, because they're telling how they think things work. Other people are telling the same. And quite often you find massive opportunities and inconsistencies that people didn't know about because they weren't talking to each other.
And value stream mapping is a lot of people's entry point into value stream management. And of course, you were into value streams before you got to Teamform. They've become even more important to you. But can you remember how you first sort of stumbled across value streams and what it was that made you do any mapping and that sort of thing?
Yeah, I need to do a bit of soul searching to get an accurate one on there. But I think fundamentally, I've worked in a sort of technology architecture background in the past, and I mentioned ITIL as well from sort of a service desk perspective. So I was always very much interested in services and products and the interaction of those products and services and internal customers, external customers. And I think I had somehow stumbled across value streams from that kind of angle. And then obviously things like theory of constraint, talking about flow and impediments and these sorts of things, all just sort of naturally triggered questions and thinking about how things flow through the organization. I mean, obviously there's a lot of stuff around lean and the like, but yeah, certainly it was probably, I'd say, the architecture and the ITIL world where it first cottoned on to me.
There is a question from the audience actually about like trying to dig a little bit deeper into your experiences and examples that you saw. I don't know whether they mean like there was, I've seen, for example, a 6-week delay of handoff to security to get some software tested in a cloud environment, a cloud service environment that I've worked in. Is there anything like that you've seen about how the value stream analysis interacts with the enterprise architecture framework?
Yeah, I mean, there's certainly a number of enterprise architecture frameworks. So, like with Agile, there's many flavors of ice cream. I try to be framework agnostic and take a little bit of each for what serves me, rather than trying to sort of take these frameworks as verbatim and gospel. So certainly, I have experience with TOGAF and the way TOGAF talks about value streams. And so a very concrete example I can give, we in a prior organization that I worked, there was a very painful process. It was effectively the onboarding process for new joiners, people joining the organization. And it's a perfect, to me, illustration of the value stream. So anyone joining a large company has a sequence of activities that are required for them to be productive. I think everyone's familiar with that side of things, but you need some security access to be able to log in, have an account, email. You also need to be in the HR system, so you need to have a line manager, a job description, etc. Ideally, or at least in the past, you were assigned a desktop computer in the office when people had those, etc., etc. And one of the challenges that we typically were facing was that process could often take up to 30 days for everything to work. And so the real world example is people turning up and not being able to log into a computer for multiple days. That's a surprisingly common problem across many organizations. I've come to understand it. It wasn't unique. And effectively what we did to try and remediate that was we collectively brought all different colleagues from security, engineering, HR, procurement, all these sorts of different areas for the vendor staff as well, and did a value stream mapping exercise and really started to measure the sort of the best case and worst case for each of these elements. And then progressively over a period of time, everyone invested in shrinking that time, and effectively people could log in and get a desktop computer sort of within the same day eventually. It took a long time and a lot of investment, but yeah, it was a massive, massive speed up. And also if you're paying people to sit at their desk and they can't log in, you're also flushing money down the toilet as well in terms of productivity and risking the experience that they're having at a new company.
It's a great example. I think that kind of onboarding example. I think we've got a blog post actually. We've probably got Patrice on the call, who's probably madly trying to look it up in the background, but I will try and dig it up and share it with people as well.
Yeah.
So a question for you, mapping our research, we do the state of VSM research every year at the VSMC, as you know, and one of the things that we look at is the VSM implementation roadmap. And we look at the adoption points on that. I'm just going to pop it in the chat so people can see it. It's a page on our website where we explain all of the steps in it. And mapping is one step in it. I was wondering what you thought or where you thought the market was at in terms of how many organisations have gone beyond mapping in your experience at the moment and into the kind of the wider world where VSM or value stream management is a methodology that they're using organisation-wide to improve the day-to-day working of a business.
That's a tricky one to answer. I mean, I think, having looked at the state of value stream management reports and everything, I think that's probably the best indicator. It seems pretty broad from what I can tell. I mean, clearly people are trying to do these sorts of things and perhaps don't know that's what it's called. So there's certainly a group of people in that regard, I'm sure, that exist. And I think in general, certainly people being organizations that have an environment where they are sort of more loosely coupled and less dependent on having to connect everything together. I think they'll be more naturally associated to the way services sort of angled. So if you pick, for example, Amazon and their 2 pizza teams and these sorts of things, they've obviously made really great progress with that. And they've made their operating model effectively a 2 pizza team size, and therefore everything is an interface to a service, right? You can't really do that in other organizations, unless you have a very opinionated Jeff Bezos, suggesting that at the top and pushing it through. I think other organizations are probably going for, I'd say, more of a grassroots organic approach where people are experimenting and trying. And certainly, there's a number of tooling vendors out there. I won't sort of pick anyone out in particular, but certainly there's a lot of vendors trying to appreciate and adopt some of these practices in terms of visualizing, connecting, measuring, and these sorts of things. So I think through using those tools, people will start to see the benefit of, measuring, visualizing, managing, all the other awesome points, inspecting, connecting, etc. So I think, there's a lot of synergies there with regards to how people have been working in terms of product management, architecture, engineering and everything else, and connecting those products together and how they flow. So yeah, I'd say there's a broad spectrum at the moment. And I think obviously value stream management's been around for a while, but certainly the understanding and, if I said to my wife, I'm joining a call about value stream management, she kind of looked at me a bit funny and asked, what is that, right? So it's not at the stage perhaps where everyone knows what it is, but certainly people are involved in product and tech and certainly the lean world will be familiar with it. But my hope is over time.
If you said to her, I'm joining a call about DevOps, would she know what that was about?
No.
DevOps is, we had a little chat about this earlier, didn't we? Because DevOps, I think, is ahead of VSM in adoption. In fact, DevOps for me is the trigger that's caused the VSM renaissance. So you just pointed out that VSM has been around for a while. So I think the prevalence and adoption of DevOps and the fact that it's got stuck in a lot of places and the fact that we've built DevOps tool chains, which inherently contain a lot of the instrumentation and telemetry that we want to see in a value stream or a digital value stream is really helpful. So we've got a couple more questions. One is quite a broad one from Daryl. Have you seen VSM used in the public sector? Absolutely, we have. We actually have quite a lot of members in the public sector. I don't think you'll remember, Daryl. In fact, I was going to do a little bit of membership promotion, so I will do that now. We did have a huddle. It's kind of on pause at the moment, but we can start it up again. We call it a government huddle. You can call it a public sector huddle if you want, where we were bringing people from that particular vertical together to talk more about what the particular challenges in that vertical are. I think the biggest one for me is that we tend not to have customers in that particular sector. We have citizens normally, but and obviously a value stream would normally have a customer that you're delivering value to, but in this case it's a citizen. So they still have digital systems. I recently moved house, so I needed to get my driving license address updated and my V5, which is the logbook for your vehicle in the UK, updated. And I did that all online the other day. So there's a couple of really good value streams from one of our governmental organisations, DVLA, that they, I think, use value stream management. They're not one of our members, but other country governments and particularly departments of defence are. So I put the link in the chat for everybody, which is the link to individual membership. We do have a voucher code for you, which will get you $50 off the $199 annual membership. That voucher code is there. It's Flow Sessions. So go crazy, come and join in our huddles and learn more about what we do. There was another question I saw, which is, do you use value stream blueprints? I personally, as a value stream mapping practitioner, tended not to, although I did often, when I was getting people to warm up for a value stream mapping exercise, would get them to experiment for 15 minutes on mapping a barista value stream, so the steps you go through to get a coffee in Starbucks. So I guess they're kind of inherently in my head, and I know really what a software development value stream or a DevOps oriented digital value stream looks like, because it starts with the fuzzy front end of having an idea and moving through, kind of refining that and getting approvals from the business and getting building out requirements, and then moving into the development, build, test, deploy, manage, optimize stage. And I've just done that in our classic linear thing, which is how we do post-it notes on a wall. But of course, in reality, we're going round and round and round a loop, because we're taking our learnings and putting them back into our product as we improve it. And for me, anything that is a product or a service is value stream. But Chris, how aligned are we?
Yeah, I mean, I think that resonates with me. I think if we're talking about an exercise of doing a value stream mapping activity, I think it may be useful for the person facilitating to be familiar with those examples. I think there's always a risk of, keeping ourselves humble and thinking we know what the answers are and therefore what the end result should look like. To me, the value is not in the end artifact. It's actually the discussion and the collaboration and the understanding that forms as people go through that process. And so if I'm not suggesting you're like this, whoever asked the question, but you don't want to be the clever person in the room that already knows all the answers and this is how it should look. Your job is to help facilitate the discussion and to get people to challenge their understandings and share and represent that. So that the collective ownership of that, I know I'm sounding a bit preachy, but you need those people to have a sense of ownership of that artifact. Or if you don't, it's your document and then you get blamed for something not being correct or something being missed out. So it's really important that they form that ownership and act as custodians to improve it and keep it up to date over time.
I just put a quote in the chat from our very good friend, the writer of the book about values through mapping, of course, Karen Martin. The mapping is more important than the map. So we all probably come into that room with an idea in our head of what it looks like, but it's the actual process of visually collaborating with each other and learning about it, isn't it? That's most important for that. Okay, what else did we want to talk about? I wanted to talk about the fact we started with talking about these ways of working and we listed loads. There's loads of different ones. And what they all have in common is they're all change programs or ideas of how to change what we do in order to become better. So they're all ways of improving what we do. But what I tend to find as one of these people that has been, flogging away at companies for years, trying to help people do stuff better, is that a lot of the time people are just trying to get stuff done. They're trying to do their day-to-day work. You hear this term BAU or business as usual quite a lot. They're just trying to get through that list of things they have to get done to keep that business running that day. And they don't often have time to take a step back and have a look at how to improve. So in your experience, how do enterprises carve out time for improvement?
I think if I had the right answer to this, I'd be a very rich person. This is a really challenging problem. I've seen it, and I'm sure everyone has. I refer to it as busy being busy, right? Where you've probably seen the little comic of, I think it's a couple of people with a wheelbarrow and it has a square wheel. And then there's someone standing to the side saying, here's a round wheel, I can help you. And they're saying in the cartoon, we're too busy, we can't slow down, right? And they're never going to get anywhere because it's a square wheel. So, or not without immense pressure and emphasis on that. So I think one thing I've learned is actually have a conversation around the problems people are having, find out where the pain points are. Don't go in trying to sell a solution. No one wants to hear about the best thing since sliced bread. Oh, have I got this magic solution for you? That's how it comes across. And I typically find talking to people about the problems that they're facing in the day, and then using sort of coaching or open style questions to delve a bit deeper. I wouldn't suggest you ask someone why 5 times repeatedly. That gets annoying very quickly. But the notion of sort of asking those questions to help people elaborate and talk about what those problems are. And very quickly, I think they will tell you what their problems are, and you can get them to think about little experiments or things to try, which will allow them to see or start to experiment and improve the problems that they have. So it's coming from a sort of user-centered problem space, as opposed to, if you just did value stream management the right way, this would solve your problem. I've heard that said about DevOps and agile and ITIL and everything else, right? And it's never the solution that solves the problems. It's focusing on the problems and working through those step by step.
Yeah, there is always a risk of these things being the emperor's new clothes, isn't there? So yeah, it's focus on the outcomes, or begin with the end in mind, those kind of things. Fortune has put quite a nice quote from Yoshino Sensei in there, though, which is, if you say you don't have time, you're right. That's why we must start immediately. It's also a great question from Anna Maria, which is examples or experiences of VSM usage that helps leverage the innovation mindset across an organization. I'm just going to preempt you, if you don't mind, or just a quick answer, which is that in this digital world, one of the things we know is that IT or the technology departments in organisations are moving from a place where they're order takers or cost centres to a place where they're strategic enablers. This means that in context of metrics, measurements and success, we should be moving away from productivity analysis and into a place where we look at capacity to innovate. So when I do value stream mapping, for example, I get enough data that enables me to tell people how much it costs to deliver a thing based on the touch time, the idle times, the overall cycle time. And then I do some analysis around how many people and what percentage of their time is spent elapsed across that, which enables me to build a spreadsheet, which gives me hours at the end. And then I can apply an average rate per hour, and I can come up with a number and say it costs you this much to get an enhancement through. And then when we do the future state map and we know we can reduce that cycle time by up to 60%, we know there's a saving, but there's a very big risk there if we pitch it as a saving, because that's the wrong way of looking at it. Because remember, we're not looking at productivity because we're a strategic enabler. What we're looking at is capacity to innovate. So what we've got is all those hours back. So now we can innovate X many more things because we've released that space for ourselves. You've nodded, so I think I was aligned with you fairly well on that bit.
100%. Yeah, and again, some of that, you know, I won't pick on large consulting firms too hard, but it's very attractive for big companies to want to buy cost savings and therefore efficiency. And unfortunately, we've seen in a lot of the markets that, you know, a lot of jobs have been made redundant recently across tech and other industries, you know, with lots of different reasons, but ultimately their efficiency plays to reduce cost. And so it's about what you do instead, rather than we will now get rid of 3 teams because we're more efficient, right? It's what can we now do that we couldn't do before as a result. So I totally agree on that one, Helen.
Perfect. We are unbelievably out of time nearly already. I'm going to let us overrun for a little bit, but I just wanted to mention a couple of more things to the audience but before we wind down. One of which is this year's State of Value Stream Management survey is open. We really need you to contribute to that. We need everybody to share their experiences, whether you've started or not. We need to know if you haven't started. That's important data as well. So I've just put the link to that survey in the chat just there. And then the next thing is, if you are advanced or enjoying your deployment of or implementation of VSM in your organisation or your clients' organisations, we are looking for speakers for Flowtopia. The call for speakers is live. I've put that in the chat now as well. The event will be online on November the 19th. We'll be formally launching and announcing that next week. But in the meantime, you can submit a talk if you want to join us there. And for my last question to Chris is AI. We nearly got through half an hour without mentioning it. Is it helping or hindering VSM at the moment? Broad question. I know you can come at it from whatever angle you like.
It's a tool like anything else, and I know that's a bit of a cop-out. I certainly at the moment I see AI as a form of automation with a statistical variance. It's not necessarily deterministic. It may be different each time you use it. So experiment and play with it and use it for analysis to provide you insight, but don't bet the house on it is what I would say. And really where you have opportunities to analyze data, to surface and visualize it. I think, for example, Simon Wardley, who's done obviously Wardley mapping, he's managed to get things like ChatGPT to generate Wardley maps itself dynamically. So there's definitely an opportunity for the automation and you know, AI-like capabilities to provide new opportunities of value and visualization. So I would explore and think about it from that perspective, rather than it necessarily is going to solve, you know, really people problems more than anything else that actually require conversations and work to improve.
Yeah. I love it. Explore, experiment, expect to relieve some cognitive load, but don't bet the farm on it. We still need ourselves to do the human things. And Patrice has just reminded me, of course, that we launched FlowBuddy, I think.
Absolutely.
Earlier this week, I think was the official launch. And we've had it with our members for a little while. But have you had a play with FlowBuddy, Chris?
I have not spent as much time as I would like, but I have had a quick click around. And I think that is the right kind of application of AI. Like, having a buddy is actually useful because you can ask questions and get interaction. You're not trying to, you know, bet the farm, as you said, right? So that's definitely an enabler in terms of knowledge and interaction for sure.
Fabulous. Well, thanks so much for joining us today, Chris. I've really appreciated the time to chat with you. I know the audience have really appreciated it as well. There's lots of thank yous in there as well already. So yeah, big thank you for the audience for joining us today. See you at the next flow session. I can't actually remember off the top of my head which one that is. Perhaps I should have had that in front of me, but I will see you somewhere sometime soon. And thanks again, Chris, for today.
Awesome. Can't wait. Thanks, everyone. Appreciate it.
Bye for now.